With a final twist of the wrench on a hopeless transmission, Jackson Turner accepted what he'd been denying for months. His auto repair shop was beyond saving. 3 missed mortgage payments, mounting supplier debts, and a reputation tarnished by his former business partner's shortcuts had left him with nothing but calloused hands and a stack of final notices. But fate has a peculiar sense of timing, and the call about his estranged cousin Keith's unexpected death arrived the same afternoon Jackson was boxing up his tools. What began as a reluctant road trip to settle a relative's affairs would unearth a Prohibition-era secret that would challenge everything Jackson knew about his family and might just offer the second chance he desperately needed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The late August heat shimmered off the asphalt as Jackson's weathered pickup truck rumbled down Main Street in Millhaven, a once prosperous manufacturing town now dotted with vacant storefronts and faded for lease signs. Economic downturn had hit this pocket of New England harder than most, transforming bustling family businesses into hollow shells. The surviving establishments, a diner, hardware store, and small-town bank, stood like stubborn holdouts against the tide of decline. Jackson hadn't planned on inheriting a garage. His own shop back in Providence had collapsed under the weight of poor decisions, primarily trusting Marcus, his childhood friend turned business partner, who'd cut corners on parts and labor while pocketing the difference. By the time Jackson discovered the fraud, customer complaints had gone viral. Their reputation was destroyed, and their finances were beyond recovery. The betrayal stung deeper than the bankruptcy. The attorney's call 3 days ago had been brief and businesslike. "Mr. Turner, I'm calling regarding your cousin Keith Turner's estate. Despite your estrangement, you're his sole beneficiary. He's left you his automotive repair business, Turner's Classic Car Garage. The property requires immediate attention, as it contains valuable vintage vehicles and equipment." The estrangement was lawyer speak for a 15-year family rift. Keith and Jackson's father's brothers, who had once run a successful garage together, had fallen out catastrophically over an inheritance dispute, with accusations of stolen designs and sabotaged projects. The Turner family had fractured, holiday gatherings had ceased, and the cousins who had once been as close as brothers had been instructed to choose sides. Jackson, now 36 and with his father 5 years in the grave, hadn't spoken to Keith since they were barely out of their teens. The news of Keith's sudden heart attack at 40 had been shocking enough. The inheritance was incomprehensible. According to the attorney, it would take just a weekend to inventory the property and prepare it for sale, with the proceeds barely enough to cover Jackson's most pressing debts. Turner's Classic Car Garage emerged through the afternoon haze as Jackson navigated the final turn. Unlike his cousin's father's original shop, which had been downtown, this property sat on the outskirts of Millhaven, a converted warehouse with high ceilings and large industrial doors. A faded hand-painted sign featured a stylized 1930s roadster and promised authentic restoration of America's finest automobiles. In Jackson's childhood memories, visits to Uncle Robert's shop had been magical. The intoxicating blend of motor oil, leather conditioner, and metal polish creating an atmosphere of possibility and craftsmanship. This place looked similar, but it felt like entering a museum of someone else's life, rather than reconnecting with his own history. He parked his truck beside the main entrance and stepped out into the oppressive heat. Through the windows he could make out the silhouettes of several vehicles beneath protective covers, arranged in neat rows across the concrete floor. The attached office, a modern addition to the original warehouse structure, appeared as meticulously maintained as everything else, its windows clean and blinds precisely aligned. The lock yielded to the key with practiced ease, suggesting regular maintenance. The door swung open silently on well-oiled hinges. Jackson flipped the light switch, surprised when modern LED fixtures illuminated the space instantly. The attorney had mentioned that utilities remained active, but Jackson had expected something more neglected. The office interior was immaculate, a stark contrast to the chaotic environment Jackson had abandoned in Providence. A polished cherry wood desk held neatly organized folders and a closed laptop. Filing cabinets with clear labels stood against one wall, while the opposite featured framed photographs of classic cars in various stages of restoration. A digital calendar on the wall displayed the current month, with appointments neatly penciled in, including one for the day after Keith's death. "This doesn't make sense," Jackson muttered, running his finger along a dustless shelf lined with automotive reference books and restoration guides. The space felt actively used rather than abandoned, as if Keith had simply stepped out for lunch, rather than passed away after a massive heart attack in a hospital 30 miles away. The rational choice would be to call the attorney immediately and explain this was more complex than he'd been led to believe. He should hire an auction service to liquidate the valuable vehicles, sell the property, and return to Providence with enough money to pay off his creditors. Yet something held him there, perhaps curiosity about the cousin who'd once been like a brother, or questions about why Keith had named him sole beneficiary despite their years of silence. Or maybe just the desperate need for any potential financial lifeline. As daylight faded, Jackson decided to stay the night. He'd brought basic provisions in his truck, a sleeping bag, change of clothes, and cooler with sandwiches and water. The office had a small kitchenette with a microwave and coffee maker, offering more comfort than he'd expected. After a simple dinner, drawn by professional curiosity about his cousin's restoration projects, Jackson began exploring the main garage area. The primary space was organized with military precision. 6 vehicles rested beneath custom-fitted covers, each with a detailed information card listing the make, model, year, and restoration status. A 1967 Shelby GT500, 1954 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, 1938 Bugatti Type 57, 1963, Aston Martin DB5. The collection represented millions in automotive history, each in various stages of meticulous restoration. The tools were equally impressive, specialized equipment for metal fabrication, upholstery work, engine rebuilding, and paint application, all organized on shadow boards or in labeled drawers. Unlike Jackson's former shop, which had made do with basic tools and improvisation, this was a master craftsman's workshop with no expense spared. Along the rear wall, a separate area housed what appeared to be Keith's passion project's experimental designs and custom modifications that pushed beyond simple restoration into automotive artistry. Sketches and technical drawings were pinned to corkboards, showing innovative mechanical solutions and design concepts that reflected extraordinary talent. As darkness settled completely, Jackson returned to the office, flashlight in hand, curious whether Keith's paperwork might offer insights into his cousin's life and business. Most documents were meticulously organized: client contracts, vendor relationships, restoration documentation. But as he sorted through them, Jackson discovered a leather portfolio wedged between reference books on the shelf. The portfolio contained detailed hand-drawn plans for something labeled the Vault Project. The drawings showed the garages, hydraulic lift, the central platform used to elevate vehicles for undercarriage work, but with significant modifications. According to these plans, the lift had been engineered to do more than just raise cars. It was designed to reveal something beneath the concrete floor. Intrigued, Jackson flipped through pages of structural calculations, mechanical specifications, and electrical diagrams. The final page contained only a single cryptic note in Keith's distinctive handwriting: "Grandfather's legacy secured. Mechanism operational but camouflaged. Activation sequence protected." As Jackson closed the portfolio, his elbow knocked a small metal box from the desk. Bending to retrieve it, he noticed something unusual about the floorboard where the box had landed, a subtle difference in texture and color compared to the surrounding wood. Heart suddenly racing, Jackson pressed his fingers against the board and felt a slight give. He applied more pressure to one end, and the board pivoted upward, revealing a small hollow space beneath the floor. Inside was a brass key unlike any modern one he'd seen, large, with an intricate Art Deco pattern and a complex bit at the end, the kind of key that might open something significant and old. Jackson held it up in the beam of his flashlight, noting the ornate engravings along its shaft patterns that resembled cocktail glasses and musical notes intertwined with what looked like stylized automobile designs from the 1920s. Outside, the sounds of a small town settling into night filtered through the window's distant traffic, the occasional dog barking, the rumble of a freight train passing on tracks that had once served Millhaven's now defunct factories. Jackson turned the key over in his palm, wondering what lock it might fit. The garage used standard modern locks, nothing that would require such an elaborate key. He slipped the key into his pocket and continued searching the office. In a drawer, beneath stacks of invoices, he found a small leather-bound journal different from the business records, more personal, with entries spanning the past 5 years. Some pages contained newspaper clippings and photographs carefully preserved with archival tape. The earliest entries described Keith's purchase of this warehouse property, his vision for a high-end restoration business, and the discovery of something unexpected during renovations. An entry from 2019 caught Jackson's attention. Demolished the old concrete slab today to install the new hydraulic system. Couldn't believe what we found underneath a sealed trapdoor and staircase leading down to what appears to be a Prohibition-era speakeasy, perfectly preserved for nearly a century. Grandfather James was right all along. The family stories were true. According to his journals, great-grandfather William Turner ran one of the most exclusive illegal clubs in New England from 1921 to 1933, serving politicians, celebrities, and industrialists. The speakeasy was never discovered because it was ingeniously hidden beneath what was then a legitimate auto repair business. When Prohibition ended, he sealed it up rather than convert it to a legal establishment, supposedly to protect powerful clients who'd frequented the place. Jackson's mind reeled as he read further. Subsequent entries documented Keith's methodical research, tracking down old newspaper articles about Millhaven during Prohibition, interviewing elderly residents about local legends, and secretly modifying the new hydraulic lift to serve dual purposes, raising vehicles for repair, and revealing the hidden entrance to the speakeasy below. A newspaper clipping from 1928 headlined "Millhaven Remains Dry Despite Regional Bootlegging" described how the town had remained mysteriously free of federal raids despite rumors of sophisticated drinking establishments operating within its boundaries. The article quoted a frustrated Prohibition agent. "Something isn't right in Millhaven. We have reliable intelligence that liquor flows freely there, yet we can never find evidence. It's as if the entire operation vanishes into thin air whenever we arrive." The final entry, dated just 2 months before Keith's death, read, "Restoration complete. The speakeasy looks exactly as it must have the day great-grandfather closed it. Original fixtures, furnishings, even the bar with bottles still full. More astonishingly, the custom car is intact, the modified 1924 Cadillac with hidden compartments designed to transport liquor. Based on the ledgers I found, the modern value of the vintage spirits collection alone exceeds $3 million. The historical significance is incalculable. I've kept this secret while deciding how to proceed: museum, historical trust, or private enterprise. Whatever happens, the Turner legacy is secure." Jackson sat back, mind spinning. Was this why his father and uncle had feuded so bitterly? Did one brother believe the other was hiding information about this potential fortune? Or had they both been searching separately, neither realizing how close they were to an extraordinary family secret. He reached for his phone to search for information about Prohibition-era speakeasies in New England, but there was no signal inside the concrete and steel warehouse. Tomorrow he would need to investigate further, starting with finding the hydraulic lift and the activation mechanism Keith had documented so carefully. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the high warehouse windows, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. After a quick breakfast from his cooler, Jackson studied the garage layout more carefully. The central hydraulic lift occupied a prominent position in the main work area, a professional-grade system capable of elevating the heaviest vintage vehicles. Grabbing Keith's journal, the brass key, and a bottle of water, Jackson began examining the lift. Unlike standard hydraulic systems, this one featured several modifications that would be imperceptible to anyone not specifically looking for them. The control panel included standard up-down switches, but also had a small brass plate on the underside that didn't match the modern components. The plate featured a keyhole that looked suspiciously compatible with the ornate key in Jackson's pocket. Heart pounding, Jackson slid beneath the control panel and inserted the brass key into the hidden lock. It turned smoothly with a satisfying click, but nothing happened immediately. He emerged from beneath the panel and noticed that the main control screen now displayed an additional option alongside the standard functions: legacy system. When Jackson selected this option, the screen changed to display a pattern of symbols, cocktail glasses, musical notes, and vintage cars arranged in a specific sequence. The journal had mentioned an activation sequence protected, suggesting this was a security measure Keith had implemented to prevent accidental discovery. The pattern looked familiar, identical to the engravings on the brass key itself. Jackson studied the key again and realized it wasn't merely decorative, it was a coded instruction. He began pressing the symbols on the touchscreen in the same sequence they appeared on the key. As the final symbol was selected, the garage filled with the sound of powerful hydraulic systems engaging, not the familiar mechanics of the lift rising, but something else entirely. The concrete floor surrounding the lift began to recede, sliding beneath the adjacent flooring to reveal a large rectangular opening approximately 15 feet square. The lift itself remained in place, but now appeared as a platform above a set of wooden stairs descending into darkness. Jackson stood transfixed as hidden LED lighting automatically illuminated the staircase recessed fixtures that Keith must have installed during his secret restoration. The stairs appeared to be original hardwood, beautifully preserved and now reinforced with modern materials to ensure safety while maintaining historical authenticity. The moment of discovery was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel outside. Someone had driven into the parking area. Instinctively, Jackson pressed the emergency stop button on the control panel, halting the floor's transformation with the opening only partially revealed. Suddenly aware that he had no idea who might be looking for his cousin's property or what might be concealed beneath it, Jackson moved quickly to the side entrance where he could observe the visitor undetected. Through the windows, he watched as a black luxury sedan with tinted windows parked beside his truck. Two men in expensive suits emerged, one older with silver hair, perhaps in his 60s, the other younger and athletically built, scanning the property with practiced efficiency. The older man held what appeared to be legal documents. "Mr. Turner," the older man called out, "we know you're here. Your truck is parked outside. I'm Richard Blackwood, representing Millhaven Development Corporation. We have a business proposition regarding your inheritance." Blackwood, the name registered immediately. According to Keith's journal, the Blackwood family had been prominent in Millhaven for generations, currently controlling the town's largest bank, real estate holdings, and development company. They had been aggressively buying properties throughout the struggling town, presumably for some large-scale redevelopment project. Jackson remained hidden, watching as the younger man began methodically checking the office and nearby areas. He couldn't stay concealed forever in the sprawling garage. But something told him revealing himself immediately would be a mistake. These men hadn't come with friendly intentions. Not at 8:30 a.m. to a property they shouldn't even know he was visiting. The key in his pocket suddenly felt heavier, more significant. Whatever Keith had discovered had drawn the attention of Millhaven's most powerful family. And now Jackson found himself at the center of a mystery that had remained hidden literally for nearly a century. Across the garage, Richard Blackwood removed his sunglasses and surveyed the impressive collection of vintage automobiles with obvious interest. "Your cousin was a talented man, Mr. Turner," he called out, voice carrying across the quiet space. "He refused a very generous offer for this property. We're prepared to extend that same offer to you, in fact, to improve upon it substantially. 3 times the market value, in cash. You could pay off your debts and start fresh with what we're offering." The mention of his financial troubles sent a chill through Jackson. They'd done their research on his situation. They knew exactly what leverage to apply. But how had they known he would be here today? Unless someone from the attorney's office had informed them. Jackson's mind raced through options. The partially opened floor panel was far enough from the entrance that he might be able to circle around through the maze of equipment and vehicles to reach his truck undetected. But then what? Run away and abandon what might be a multi-million-dollar historical discovery buried beneath his feet. The younger man returned to Blackwood's side, shaking his head. "Office is clear. He must be somewhere in the garage," he reported. Just loud enough for Jackson to hear. "Mr. Turner," Blackwood called again, his tone shifting from friendly to businesslike. "Your cousin spent years chasing family myths and legends. There's nothing of value here except the property itself, which my company is prepared to purchase immediately. Let's not waste each other's time." Jackson took a deep breath, weighing his options. Whatever Keith had discovered was valuable enough that the Blackwood family had been trying to acquire this property. Walking away meant surrendering not just potential fortune, but answers about his family's history and the rift that had divided them. Decision made, he slipped deeper into the shadows of the garage, determined to find a way to fully activate the hidden entrance, explore what lay beneath, and uncover the truth about what had happened in Millhaven all those years ago. The treasure hunt his cousin had started was now his to finish, with the descendants of those involved in the original Prohibition-era enterprise circling ever closer. Somewhere beneath the concrete floor, a perfectly preserved piece of American history waited to reveal its secrets to whoever reached it first. Jackson crouched lower behind a vintage 1956 Porsche Speedster, grateful for the cover provided by its protective tarp as he considered his next move. The Blackwood men continued methodically searching the garage's southern section, moving from vehicle to vehicle with practiced efficiency. He needed to think. Running would mean abandoning whatever lay beneath the partially opened floor panel. Confronting Blackwood directly seemed unwise without knowing his true intentions. As the 2 men focused their search on the office area, Jackson seized his opportunity. Moving silently between the covered cars, he made his way back to the hydraulic lift controls. The brass key remained in the hidden lock, the sequence partially entered. With a final glance toward his unwelcome visitors, Jackson completed the activation pattern. The hydraulic system re-engaged with a low hum quieter than he'd expected, suggesting Keith had installed sound-dampening modifications. The concrete panels continued their smooth retraction, fully revealing the staircase descending into darkness. Jackson didn't hesitate. He slipped onto the stairs, located an emergency control panel Keith had installed on the wall, and pressed the button marked Conceal. Above him, the floor panels began sliding closed again, the sophisticated system operating with remarkable precision. As the last sliver of garage light disappeared, LED lighting automatically illuminated the stairwell. Jackson descended 26 steps into what appeared to be an antechamber, a small room with Art Deco wallpaper, a vintage telephone on the wall, and a substantial wooden door reinforced with decorative metalwork. Next to the door was an intercom system and a small window at eye level, the classic Speakeasy security setup, now preserved as a museum piece. The door wasn't locked, but opened with the gentle pressure of Jackson's hand. Beyond lay a sight that stole his breath, a perfectly preserved 1920s speakeasy, untouched by time and meticulously restored by his cousin. The space was far larger than he'd anticipated, occupying what must be the entire footprint of the garage. Above nearly 3,000 square feet of Prohibition-era opulence, a long mahogany bar dominated one wall, its surface polished to a mirror shine, brass footrail gleaming beneath. Behind it stood shelves of original liquor bottles, scotch, gin, bourbon, and champagne with labels dating to the 1920s. The bottles hadn't merely been preserved. They appeared to have been expertly stored in optimal conditions, their contents potentially still consumable and extraordinarily valuable as collector's items. Round tables with period-appropriate chairs filled the center of the room, each with authentic decorative elements, crystal ashtrays, Art Deco lamps with stained glass shades, and small dance cards. A stage occupied the far end, complete with vintage microphones and a baby grand piano. The walls featured hand-painted murals, depicting stylized scenes of 1920s high society elegant figures dancing, driving roadsters, and enjoying the forbiddance pleasures of the jazz age. Most remarkable was a separate area to the right, what appeared to be a small automotive showroom containing a single vehicle. The 1924 Cadillac mentioned in Keith's journal sat on a slightly raised platform, its midnight blue paint and chrome detailing immaculate. Unlike standard models of the era, this one featured custom modifications, wider running boards, reinforced suspension, and most notably, ingeniously designed hidden compartments built into the doors, floorboards, and trunk for transporting contraband liquor. "This is unbelievable," Jackson whispered, running his hand along the car's flawless fender. Keith hadn't just discovered the speakeasy. He'd painstakingly restored everything to museum-quality condition. The work represented thousands of hours and extraordinary expertise. A discreet door behind the bar led to what had once been the proprietor's office, now containing display cases of artifacts, business ledgers, photographs, newspaper clippings, and personal effects documenting the speakeasy's operation from 1921 to 1933. Jackson approached a large, framed photograph on the wall showing a group of men in formal attire standing proudly before the Cadillac. At the center stood a man who bore a striking resemblance to Jackson himself, his great-grandfather William Turner. Next to this was a smaller photograph showing William shaking hands with a distinguished-looking gentleman outside what appeared to be the original garage. The caption beneath read, "William Turner and Frederick Blackwood, 1928. The Blackwood connection explained. Richard's interest in the property, his family had history here too." A glass display case contained several leather-bound ledgers. Jackson carefully opened the first, finding detailed records of the speakeasy's operation, inventory lists, employee payments, and most significantly, customer accounts. The clientele was documented through a sophisticated code system, with prominent names thinly disguised. The mayor recorded as his honor, a state senator as Capitol Hill, and various industrialists and celebrities identified by clever nicknames. Most interesting was a recurring entry for Silver Fox, always ordering the most expensive champagne and highest quality scotch, always paying double the asking price. The final ledger contained financial summaries indicating the speakeasy had been extraordinarily profitable, with notations showing substantial amounts converted to various investments, real estate, stocks, and business ventures throughout New England. According to these records, William Turner had amassed a significant fortune before Prohibition's repeal. then strategically diversified rather than continuing in the now legal liquor business. Jackson's exploration was interrupted by a faint sound. From above, footsteps moving across the garage floor directly over the speakeasy. The Blackwoods were still searching. While the hidden entrance appeared secure, Jackson felt vulnerable. Knowing they remained so close, he needed to understand more about what he'd discovered and why it mattered enough for Deveu, Millhaven's most powerful family, to arrive at the garage within hours of his arrival. A small safe embedded in the office wall caught his attention. Modern, not part of the original speakeasy, likely installed by Keith. It featured a digital keypad rather than a traditional combination lock. Jackson tried several obvious combinations. Keith's birth date, the year the speakeasy opened, the date Prohibition ended, with no success. Then, on a hunch, he tried the date from the photograph of William Turner and Frederick Blackwood, June 28, 1928. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing a leather portfolio and a small wooden box. The portfolio contained documents organized with Keith's characteristic precision: property deeds, banking records, and legal correspondence dating back to the 1930s. As Jackson skimmed these materials, a remarkable narrative emerged. After Prohibition ended, William Turner had sealed the speakeasy rather than converting it to a legal establishment. The documentation suggested this wasn't merely to protect former clients, but because of a significant dispute with his business partner, Frederick Blackwood. According to letters between attorneys, Blackwood had attempted to claim majority ownership of both the speakeasy and its substantial profits, despite having been a silent partner whose primary contribution was political protection through his banking and municipal connections. William had prevailed in this dispute, retaining control of his legitimate automotive business and the sealed speakeasy beneath it. However, correspondence from the 1940s revealed that the Blackwood family had never abandoned their claim, using their growing influence to systematically undermine the Turner automotive business, restricting loans, diverting clients, and eventually forcing William to sell his downtown garage and relocate to a smaller operation. Most significantly, a document from 1952 detailed the original partnership agreement between William Turner and Frederick Blackwood, with a stunning revelation. While Blackwood had indeed provided political protection, his primary contribution had been storage of the operation's profits in his bank's vault during Prohibition raids. According to William's private accounting, nearly $1.2 million, equivalent to over $20 million today, had been deposited with Blackwood for safekeeping, but never returned after Prohibition ended. The wooden box contained something even more remarkable: a small leather notebook and a collection of photographs. The notebook was William Turner's personal journal, documenting his suspicions that Blackwood had used the speakeasy's profits to establish his family's banking empire, transforming from a modest local financial institution to the region's dominant economic force. The photograph showed various locations around Millhaven where William believed Blackwood had invested the misappropriated funds properties that now formed the core of Blackwood Development Corporation's holdings. A final letter, written by William to his son Robert, Jackson's grandfather, in 1965, explained his decision to keep the speakeasy sealed. The evidence of Frederick's theft remains preserved below, along with our rightful legacy. Someday the truth will emerge, and the Turner name will be restored. Until then, protect this secret and remember that our family's true wealth lies not in dollars stolen, but in the skills and determination passed from father to son. Jackson sat back, understanding dawning. The bitter feud between his father and uncle likely stemmed from disagreements about how to handle this legacy. One brother, perhaps, wanting to expose the truth and reclaim what was taken, the other fearing the consequences of challenging Millhaven's most powerful family. Keith had not only discovered the physical speakeasy, but had assembled evidence of historical wrongs that had shaped both families for generations. The sound of a vehicle starting above pulled Jackson from his thoughts. Through a cleverly disguised air vent that provided both ventilation and audio surveillance of the garage, he could hear the Blackwoods preparing to leave. This was likely a tactical retreat rather than abandonment of their search. "We'll return with the paperwork tomorrow," Richard Blackwood was saying. "The Turner inheritance is more complicated than anticipated. In the meantime, have Stevens monitor the property. If Turner returns, I want to know immediately." Once the sound of their vehicle faded, Jackson returned to the antechamber and located the control panel. According to Keith's modifications, the system could open the floor panel either entirely or partially, the latter designed to allow access while minimizing the chance of discovery. Jackson selected this option and climbed the stairs as the concrete slid back just enough to permit his exit. Back in the garage, Jackson moved quickly, knowing the Blackwoods would likely have someone watching the property soon. He needed allies and information. Keith's journal had mentioned a name that might provide both Eleanor Martinez, the town's historical society director and apparently Keith's confidant in researching Millhaven's Prohibition history. Before leaving, Jackson transferred the most crucial documents to his backpack, carefully secured the hidden entrance, and performed a quick survey of the garage to ensure nothing appeared disturbed. The brass key went into his pocket, the essential link to both the physical space below and the historical secrets it contained. The Millhaven Historical Society occupied a Victorian mansion on Maple Street, its well-maintained gardens and fresh paint standing out among the town's general atmosphere of decline. A small sign indicated it was open, though no other visitors were visible as Jackson parked his truck and approached the entrance. The interior was cool and quiet, walls lined with photographs documenting Millhaven's evolution from a bustling manufacturing center to its current struggling state. Display cases contained artifacts from the town's more prosperous era factory tools, municipal records, and personal items donated by longtime residents. "Can I help you?" A voice called from an adjacent room. A woman in her early 60s emerged, glasses perched on her head, a tablet computer in her hands. Her expression shifted from professional courtesy to surprised recognition as she took in Jackson's features. "You must be Jackson Turner. You look remarkably like your cousin." "You knew Keith?" Jackson asked, extending his hand. "Eleanor Martinez, town historian and Keith's research partner on several projects." She shook his hand firmly. "I was at his memorial service last week. I'm sorry for your loss. He spoke of you often, despite your family's complications." Jackson's surprise must have shown on his face. "Keith believed families shouldn't remain fractured by past disputes," Eleanor explained. "He was working to reconnect with you before his heart attack. That's partly why he named you his beneficiary." "I didn't know," Jackson admitted. "We haven't spoken in 15 years. Eleanor studied him thoughtfully. "The Blackwoods have already visited you, haven't they?" "They arrived at my office the day after Keith's death, asking pointed questions about his research into Prohibition-era Millhaven." "They were at the garage this morning," Jackson confirmed, "offering 3 times market value for the property." "Of course they were." Eleanor's expression hardened. "They've been trying to acquire that warehouse since Keith bought it 5 years ago. The offers kept increasing as his renovations progressed." She glanced around the empty museum before continuing in a lower voice. "What has Keith shown you?" Jackson hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I found something beneath the garage floor," he finally said, "and documents suggesting a historical connection between the Turner and Blackwood families that might explain why they're so interested in the property." Eleanor nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Keith discovered the Speakeasy 3 years ago during renovations. He came to me for help researching its history and significance. What began as historical curiosity evolved into something more consequential, as we uncovered evidence of how the Blackwood fortune was actually established." She led Jackson to her office, closing the door before continuing. Millhaven's current economic struggles aren't simply bad luck or changing markets. The Blackwood family has systematically undermined independent businesses for generations, creating dependency on their bank and development company. They've accumulated property through foreclosures, manipulated zoning laws, and discouraged outside investment, all while presenting themselves as the town's benevolent caretakers. Why would they deliberately weaken their own community? Jackson asked. Control, Eleanor replied simply. Frederick Blackwood began with stolen prohibition money, but his descendants perfected the strategy to keep property values depressed. For easy acquisition, maintain just enough economic activity to sustain the workforce, and position themselves as the only solution to problems they themselves engineered. She retrieved a folder from her desk. Keith compiled evidence of this pattern over the past century. The Speakeasy isn't just a historical curiosity, it's the origin point of a system that has shaped Millhaven for generations. The liquor bottles and vintage car are valuable, certainly, but the documentation of how the Blackwood Empire began is potentially devastating to their carefully constructed narrative. Richard Blackwood mentioned a development project, Jackson recalled. Eleanor's expression darkened. Blackwood Renaissance's supposed revitalization plan that would demolish much of historic Millhaven for luxury condominiums, high-end retail, and a corporate campus. They've been acquiring key properties for years, but several holdouts remain. Your cousin's garage is one of them, strategically located and sitting on what they claim is contaminated soil requiring remediation. Contaminated soil, Jackson repeated, understanding dawning. They know what's underneath. They're creating pretext to excavate. Precisely, Eleanor confirmed. Keith believed Richard Blackwood somehow learned about the Speakeasy, perhaps through family records or an elderly relative's recollection. The increasing pressure to sell, the environmental testing requests, the offers well above market value all pointed to specific knowledge rather than general development interests. The implications were staggering. If the Blackwoods knew about the Speakeasy and its contents, they wouldn't stop at buying the property. They would need to ensure all evidence of their family's fraudulent foundation disappeared completely. Keith wasn't just preserving history, Jackson realized. He was gathering evidence. Eleanor nodded solemnly. And now that responsibility has passed to you, the question is, what will you do with it? As Jackson left the Historical Society, the weight of this unexpected inheritance pressed upon him. What had begun as a weekend task to inventory a property had evolved into something far more consequential, not just potential financial salvation through valuable collectibles, but a chance to address historical wrongs that had shaped an entire community. Back in his truck, Jackson made a decision. Rather than returning directly to the garage where Blackwood's men might be watching, he drove to the local library. If he was going to protect his cousin's discovery and determine his next steps, he needed to understand more about current events in Millhaven, particularly this Blackwood Renaissance project and its implications. The Millhaven Public Library stood as a testament to more prosperous times, a grand stone structure with columns and stained glass windows, now showing signs of deferred maintenance. Inside, Jackson found a quiet corner with a computer terminal and began researching the Blackwood Renaissance project. Local news archives revealed the ambitious scale of the proposed development, a complete transformation of Millhaven's downtown and warehouse district into what promotional materials called a vibrant mixed-use community blending historical character with modern luxury. Architectural renderings showed glass and steel structures replacing the town's century-old buildings, with token historical facades preserved as decorative elements. A public forum from 6 months earlier had drawn heated debate. While some residents welcomed any economic revitalization, others expressed concern about displacement of existing businesses and the project's focus on attracting wealthy outsiders rather than serving current community needs. The most vocal opponent had been Keith Turner, quoted repeatedly challenging the environmental impact studies and historical preservation assessments. Most revealing was a recent article detailing the project's final obstacle: 7 strategic properties whose owners refused to sell. According to Richard Blackwood, these unreasonable holdouts were preventing Millhaven's economic salvation. A sidebar featured photographs of these properties, Keith's garage prominently among them. "Excuse me," a voice interrupted. Jackson looked up to find a young woman with a press badge observing him. "You're Jackson Turner, aren't you?" Keith's cousin? Her directness caught him off guard. "I am. And you are?" "Maya Rodriguez, Millhaven Gazette." She gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Mind if I join you? I've been trying to reach you since you arrived in town." Jackson hesitated, then nodded. The local paper might provide valuable perspective, and Maya seemed more interested in genuine conversation than immediate headlines. "How did you know I was here?" he asked as she sat down. "Small town," Maya shrugged. "Someone saw your truck at the Historical Society. Then here. When you inherit property from Millhaven's most outspoken development critic 2 weeks after his unexpected death, people notice." "You knew Keith well?" Jackson asked. "I covered his preservation efforts for the past 3 years, Maya explained. He became a source, then something of a mentor. Keith believed journalism should serve the community, not just report on it. He shared historical documents showing how Millhaven's decline wasn't inevitable but engineered primarily by the Blackwood family." She pulled out a notebook. "I'm working on a comprehensive piece about the Renaissance project, including the suspicious timing of several recent events. 3 of the 7 property holdouts have experienced serious setbacks in the past month. A mysterious fire at Rodriguez Auto Parts. Health code violation suddenly discovered at Miller's Diner after 20 years of clean inspections. And now Keith's unexpected death at 50 with no prior heart conditions." Jackson felt a chill. "Are you suggesting Keith's death wasn't natural?" Maya lowered her voice. "The medical examiner found nothing suspicious, but Keith was in excellent health, didn't smoke, exercised regularly. 2 days before his heart attack, he called me excited about a documentary gold mine. He'd compiled evidence that would change Millhaven's future by exposing its past. We scheduled an interview that never happened." The implications were disturbing but not entirely surprising given what Jackson had discovered. "The Blackwoods visited the garage this morning," he said carefully. "Offered 3 times market value." "Of course they did," Maya replied. "That property is critical to their plans, not just for location, but because of what Keith believed was beneath it." "What do you know about that?" Jackson asked, deliberately vague. Maya studied him for a moment before responding. "Keith never showed me directly, but he hinted at a significant historical discovery. Something connecting Millhaven's Prohibition-era to its current power structures. He was methodically gathering documentation before going public. Jackson made a decision. Maya's investigation aligned with what he'd discovered, and he needed allies who understood local dynamics. "I found it," he said quietly. "A perfectly preserved speakeasy beneath the garage, along with evidence suggesting the Blackwood fortune originated from appropriated Prohibition profits belonging to my great-grandfather." Maya's eyes widened. That's exactly what Keith suspected. He believed William Turner and Frederick Blackwood were business partners until Frederick betrayed him, using the speakeasy profits to establish the bank that became Blackwood Financial Group. "The evidence is compelling," Jackson confirmed. "Documents, photographs, financial records, all preserved alongside the physical speakeasy, which Keith restored to museum quality." "This changes everything," Maya said, excitement building in her voice. "It's not just about stopping one development project. It's about exposing the fraudulent foundation of Millhaven's most powerful family and their century of economic manipulation." As they continued talking, Maya shared her extensive research on the Renaissance project's true purpose. Beyond luxury, housing and retail, the plans included significant underground infrastructure ostensibly for parking and utilities, but requiring excavation precisely where Keith's garage stood. They know what's down there, Maya concluded. They need to erase the evidence before proceeding with their project. That's why the pressure to sell has intensified since Keith's death. They're hoping his heir won't understand the property's true significance. Before leaving the library, Jackson and Maya exchanged contact information and agreed to meet that evening with Eleanor from the Historical Society. If they were going to protect Keith's discovery and use it effectively, they needed a strategic approach. As Jackson returned to his truck, a text message arrived from an unknown number. Your cousin refused reasonable offers. Don't make the same mistake. Blackwood Enterprises. The implied threat only strengthened his resolve. Jackson drove through town, seeing Millhaven with new eyes. The vacant storefronts and struggling businesses now appeared not as victims of inevitable economic forces, but as casualties of deliberate strategies spanning generations. The Blackwood Bank occupied the town's most prominent corner, its imposing stone facade and logo, a silver fox, subtly reinforcing the family's dominance. Rather than returning directly to the garage where he might be observed, Jackson stopped at a small diner on the outskirts of town. Over coffee and a sandwich, he reviewed the documents he'd brought from the Speakeasy, particularly the evidence of financial transactions between William Turner and Frederick Blackwood. The waitress, an older woman named Doris, recognized him immediately. You're Will Turner's great-grandson, aren't you? Got his eyes and jawline. Surprised, Jackson nodded. You knew my great-grandfather? My mother worked for him at the original garage downtown, Doris explained, refilling his coffee. Always said Will Turner was the most honest businessman in Millhaven, unlike some others she could name. She glanced meaningfully at a framed photograph on the wall, showing Millhaven's Main Street, circa 1935. The Blackwood Bank prominently featured. The Turners built things, Doris continued. The Blackwoods acquired them. That's been Millhaven's story for a century. As Jackson prepared to leave, Doris lowered her voice. Your cousin was asking the right questions, standing up when others wouldn't. Be careful, the Blackwoods don't appreciate resistance. By late afternoon, Jackson had encountered similar reactions from several longtime residents, respect for the Turner name, thinly veiled resentment toward the Blackwoods, and warnings about challenging established power. He also noticed a black sedan following him at a discreet distance, Blackwood surveillance, presumably. For their evening meeting, Eleanor suggested her home rather than the Historical Society or garage, where they might be observed. She lived in a modest bungalow in Millhaven's older residential district, its garden meticulously maintained with heritage plants documented, with small identification markers. Maya arrived shortly after Jackson, bringing dinner from a local restaurant and additional research materials. Together, they spread their collective findings across Eleanor's dining table: historical documents, financial records, photographs, and Maya's investigative notes. The evidence is overwhelming, Eleanor said, examining the ledgers Jackson had retrieved from the Speakeasy. Frederick Blackwood systematically embezzled from the partnership with William Turner, using Prohibition profits to recapitalize his struggling bank during the Depression. The Blackwood financial empire was literally built on stolen money, and they've maintained power through systematic economic manipulation ever since, Maya added, pointing to her charts tracking property acquisitions and business closures over decades. They've created artificial scarcity, controlled credit access, and prevented outside investment, all while presenting themselves as Millhaven's economic saviors. Jackson studied the Renaissance project plans. This development isn't about revitalizing Millhaven for its residents. It's about erasing history and replacing the existing community with wealthy outsiders who won't question the Blackwood narrative. Precisely, Eleanor confirmed. Richard Blackwood doesn't just want to build luxury condominiums, he wants to literally bury evidence of how his family acquired its wealth and influence. "So what do we do?" Jackson asked. "I've owned this property for less than 48 hours. I'm not from here, have no standing in the community, and frankly, plan to sell everything and return to Providence for discovering all this." Eleanor and Maya exchanged glances. "Keith believed the Speakeasy shouldn't simply be preserved as a private collection," Eleanor said carefully. "He envisioned it as a public historical site and community resource, something that could revitalize Millhaven through authentic historical tourism rather than artificial development. He was working with preservationists and business development experts," Maya explained, retrieving additional documents from her bag. "These are preliminary plans for Turner's Prohibition experience, a museum, educational center, and event space utilizing the original Speakeasy. The vintage spirits collection alone could fund operations through controlled auction sales, while the historical narrative would draw tourism and educational interest." Jackson examined the business plan, impressed by its thoroughness. This wasn't mere historical preservation, but a viable enterprise that could benefit the community while maintaining authenticity. Keith had envisioned guided tours, historical reenactments, educational programs for schools, and partnerships with local businesses to create a genuine revitalization effort centered on Millhaven's actual history rather than an imposed corporate vision. "This is remarkable," Jackson admitted. "But implementing it would mean staying in Millhaven, confronting the Blackwoods directly, and essentially starting a new business when my last one failed catastrophically." "You wouldn't be doing it alone," Eleanor assured him. Keith built a network of supporters, preservationists, business owners, community activists, all waiting for the right moment to challenge the Blackwood Renaissance publicly. "And you have something they desperately want," Maya pointed out. "Not just the physical property, but evidence that could fundamentally undermine their carefully constructed public image and potentially lead to legal consequences." As their discussion continued into the evening, Jackson found himself torn between self-preservation instincts and a growing sense of responsibility. His cousin had trusted him with this inheritance for a reason, believing that despite their estrangement, Jackson shared the Turner family's core values of craftsmanship, integrity, and community connection. "The Blackwoods will return tomorrow expecting an answer," Jackson said finally. "They'll increase pressure when I refuse to sell." "Then we need to move quickly," Eleanor replied. "Maya can begin preparing the investigative piece with the documentation you've provided, while I activate Keith's network of supporters. Most importantly, we need to secure the Speakeasy and its contents, both physically and legally." Maya nodded. "I have contacts at the State Historical Preservation Office who can initiate emergency historical designation proceedings. Once filed, any demolition or significant alteration would be prohibited while the application is reviewed." "That might buy us time," Jackson agreed. "But Richard Blackwood strikes me as someone who finds ways around regulations when necessary. We need additional protection." Eleanor smiled for the first time that evening. Keith anticipated this. In his final weeks, he consulted with an attorney specializing in historical preservation to establish a legal framework that would make the Speakeasy virtually untouchable. She retrieved a folder from her bookshelf. "These are the incorporation documents for the Millhaven Historical Trust, with Keith Turner as founding trustee. The paperwork is complete except for final signatures and filing. The trust's explicit purpose is preserving significant historical sites in Millhaven, with the Turner property specifically identified as its initial holding. And I'm guessing Keith intended me to become trustee after him," Jackson said, understanding dawning. "He believed you would make the right choice when you understood what was at stake," Eleanor confirmed. "Not just financial opportunity, but a chance to heal old family wounds and help a community reclaim its authentic history." As their meeting concluded, Jackson felt a clarity of purpose he hadn't experienced since before his business partnership imploded. The path forward wasn't simple, but it was right. Honor his cousin's vision, protect his family's legacy, and help Millhaven free itself from generations of economic manipulation. I'll need to secure the physical evidence tonight, he decided. The Blackwoods know I've been researching their project and meeting with you both. They won't wait patiently if they believe their family secrets are at risk of exposure. Be careful, Maya cautioned. I'm convinced they're monitoring the garage. Then we'll need a distraction, Jackson replied, a plan forming. Eleanor, can you activate Keith's network immediately? Have them gather at the garage tomorrow morning when Blackwood arrives. Community members, preservation advocates, local business owners, all prepared to publicly oppose the Renaissance project. A show of solidarity, Eleanor nodded. It could work. Richard Blackwood prefers operating behind the scenes, applying pressure privately rather than facing public opposition. Meanwhile, I'll spend tonight documenting everything in the Speakeasy, Jackson continued. The historical trust documents were prepared for signature. Maya's preliminary article would appear in the morning edition of the Millhaven Gazette, and Eleanor had mobilized Keith's network of supporters to arrive at the garage by 9 o'clock, and precisely when Richard Blackwood had scheduled his return. What Jackson hadn't expected was the convoy of vehicles that began arriving at 7:30, and not just Eleanor's preservation advocates, but dozens of Millhaven residents spanning generations. Shop owners who'd resisted Blackwood development pressure. Elderly citizens with long memories of the town's manipulated decline. Young families seeking authentic community rather than corporate gentrification. And even several former Blackwood Bank employees with their own stories to tell. Word spread overnight, Eleanor explained as she joined Jackson at the garage entrance. Maya's article hit the digital edition at 5 a.m., and people started calling each other immediately. This isn't just about one historical site anymore, it's about Millhaven reclaiming its narrative. The article's headline was bold, Prohibition's secret beneath Millhaven garage. Historic Speakeasy discovered intact. Documents reveal town's hidden history. While carefully avoiding direct accusations against the Blackwood family, Maya had masterfully connected the Speakeasy's existence to questions about Millhaven's economic development patterns, inviting readers to consider why certain power structures remained unchallenged for generations. By 8:45 a.m., nearly 200 people had gathered in and around the garage property, many carrying hastily made signs, "Preserve our history. Millhaven's future needs its past," and pointedly, "Development for whom?" Local television crews arrived, drawn by the spontaneous demonstration in a town not known for public protest. At precisely 9 a.m., Richard Blackwood's convoy appeared, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows pulling into the already crowded parking area. The crowd parted reluctantly, murmurs rippling through the gathering as Blackwood emerged from the lead vehicle, his confident expression faltering momentarily at the unexpected assembly. "Mr. Turner," he called, approaching Jackson with forced composure. "I wasn't aware we'd be conducting our business in such a public forum." "Neither was I," Jackson replied evenly. "But it seems Millhaven has strong opinions about the future of this property." Blackwood glanced at the crowd, recognition and calculation flashing across his features as he identified prominent community members. "Perhaps we should reschedule our discussion for a more appropriate setting." "Actually," Jackson responded, "I believe transparency is exactly what this situation requires. After all, what we're discussing isn't just a real estate transaction, it's the preservation or erasure of crucial historical evidence." Blackwood's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Turner, but my company has made a generous offer for this property, an offer that would allow you to resolve your considerable financial difficulties and return to Providence without further entanglements in Millhaven's affairs." "That's thoughtful," Jackson acknowledged, "but I've decided to honor my cousin's intentions for this property. As of this morning, I've signed the incorporation documents establishing the Millhaven Historical Trust, with this garage and its contents as the trust's primary asset. I'm afraid it's no longer available for purchase at any price." The crowd murmured approvingly as Blackwood's composure slipped further. "That's unfortunate. Environmental assessments indicate this property requires significant remediation contamination from decades of automotive work. The necessary permits for public access would be challenging to obtain." Eleanor stepped forward, a folder in hand. "Actually, independent environmental assessment was completed last month, showing no significant contamination. And the State Historical Preservation Office has already received our application for landmark designation, which was filed electronically at 6 a.m. today." Blackwood's expression hardened as he realized the coordinated resistance he faced. "This is about more than one property, Mr. Turner. The Renaissance Project represents Millhaven's only viable path forward: jobs, tax revenue, economic revitalization. Blocking progress for the sake of sentimentality does this community no favors." An elderly man pushed through the crowd. Jim Miller, owner of the diner, facing similar pressure. "We've heard about your kind of progress for decades, Richard. Somehow it always benefits Blackwood Holdings while the rest of us get squeezed out." Others joined in, voices rising with long-suppressed frustrations about manipulated property values, selectively denied loans, and suspicious timing of building code enforcements against Renaissance holdouts. What had begun as a property negotiation was rapidly evolving into a public referendum on Blackwood's influence over Millhaven. Maya arrived, press credentials visible, recorder in hand. "Mr. Blackwood, would you care to comment on documents discovered in the Speakeasy suggesting your great-grandfather, Frederick Blackwood, misappropriated Prohibition-era profits that rightfully belonged to William Turner, funds that appear to have recapitalized Blackwood Bank during the Depression?" The targeted question landed like a physical blow. Blackwood's face paled, confirming he understood precisely what had been discovered. "That's preposterous ancient history distorted through incomplete records and family mythology." "The records are remarkably complete," Jackson countered, producing copies of the partnership agreement and financial ledgers, including detailed accounting of $1.2 million in 1930s dollars deposited with Frederick Blackwood for safekeeping money never returned, and coincidentally matching the amount that saved Blackwood Bank from collapse in 1933. As television cameras captured the confrontation, Jackson continued, "This isn't about blocking progress, Mr. Blackwood. It's about ensuring that Millhaven's future is built on truth rather than convenient fictions. The Speakeasy below this garage isn't just a historical curiosity, it's evidence of how power in this town was acquired and maintained through generations." Blackwood glanced at his associates, calculating options rapidly diminishing. "These are serious allegations that would require proper legal examination, not trial by public opinion. If you believe you have legitimate claims, there are appropriate channels, like Millhaven's court system." Eleanor interrupted. "The same courts where Judge Harrington, your brother-in-law, presides. Or perhaps you'd prefer arbitration through the Chamber of Commerce chaired by your cousin Thomas." The crowd's energy intensified, decades of resentment finding voice as more residents stepped forward with their own stories of Blackwood's systematic economic manipulation businesses undercut when they became too successful. Properties mysteriously reassessed when owners refused buyout offers. Loans called in during critical expansion phases. Jackson watched the communal catharsis unfolding, realizing this moment transcended his personal situation. Millhaven wasn't just confronting one powerful family, but reclaiming agency over its economic narrative. The Speakeasy had provided the catalyst, but the underlying tensions had been building for generations. "Here's what's going to happen," Jackson announced, addressing both Blackwood and the assembled community. "The Millhaven Historical Trust will preserve the Speakeasy as a public educational resource and museum. The historical documentation will be made available to appropriate authorities for review of any legal implications. And most importantly, the Renaissance project will be reassessed with genuine community input rather than imposed corporate vision. Blackwood's expression shifted from shock to cold calculation. You've made a powerful enemy today, Mr. Turner. Whatever financial troubles brought you to Millhaven will seem trivial compared to what follows. That sounds remarkably like a threat, Maya commented, recorders still running as television cameras. Captured Blackwood's reaction. Simply a business observation, Blackwood replied, regaining composure. Mr. Turner has made claims that will require vigorous legal response. The consequences of defamation can be significant. As Blackwood and his entourage retreated to their vehicles, the crowd's energy transformed from confrontation to celebration. What had begun as a property dispute had catalyzed a community's reclamation of its economic narrative, a first step toward breaking cycles of dependency and manipulation spanning generations. Eleanor approached Jackson as the gathering began to evolve into an impromptu planning session, with community members offering expertise, resources, and support for the Speakeasy's preservation and public access. Keith would be proud, she sighed quietly. He believed the truth about Millhaven's past could transform its future. He just needed someone with the courage to bring that truth into the light. I'm still processing that it's happening, Jackson admitted. 24 hours ago, I was planning to sell everything and return to Providence with whatever I could salvage financially. And now? Jackson surveyed the energized community, the garage that had unexpectedly connected him to family legacy, and the opportunity to build something meaningful from near financial ruin. Now I'm thinking about what my cousin saw in this place. Not just history worth preserving, but a foundation for something new. The weeks that followed transformed both Jackson and Millhaven in ways neither could have anticipated. The Speakeasy's public unveiling drew national media attention, with preservation experts, historians, and Prohibition-era enthusiasts converging on the formerly struggling town. The Turner Prohibition experience became an overnight cultural attraction, with guided tours operating at capacity and advance bookings stretching months into the future. More significantly, the revelation of the Blackwood family's fraudulent foundation triggered formal investigations by state banking authorities and the Attorney General's office. While legal proceedings would continue for years, the immediate impact was profound. Richard Blackwood resigned as CEO of Blackwood Financial Group. The Renaissance project was indefinitely suspended pending community review, and several long dormant antitrust concerns regarding Blackwood's regional business holdings received renewed scrutiny. For Jackson, the unexpected inheritance had evolved from burden to calling. His automotive expertise found purpose in the restoration and maintenance of the vintage Prohibition-era vehicles, while his business experience, hard lessons included, proved valuable in establishing the museum's operational framework. The financial crisis that had driven him to Millhaven faded as the museum's success provided stability and purpose beyond mere survival. 3 months after that confrontational morning, Jackson stood in the Speakeasy, now carefully preserved, but modified for public access, watching visitors' expressions of wonder as they descended the stairs into living history. The vintage Cadillac remained the centerpiece, its secret compartments now revealed through clever lighting and interpretive displays explaining its role in Prohibition-era distribution networks. Maya joined him, notepad in hand. Her ongoing investigative series on Millhaven's economic history had recently been nominated for a regional journalism award, with publication interest in expanding the work into a book. The state's Economic Development Office called today, she informed him. They're interested in featuring Millhaven in their authentic heritage tourism campaign, specifically highlighting how communities can leverage historical assets for sustainable growth without corporate redevelopment. Jackson nodded appreciatively. Keith understood something I didn't initially, that authentic history has power beyond nostalgia. It provides foundation for building something genuine rather than imposed. Speaking of building, Maya continued, the Community Development Committee wants your input on the Cooperative Business District. They're planning for the former Blackwood properties. Apparently, your perspective as both outsider and newly committed local offers valuable balance. This new reality still occasionally struck Jackson as surreal, from bankruptcy and betrayal in Providence to community leadership in Millhaven in just a few months. The garage that had initially represented obligation had become the nexus of personal and community reinvention. Eleanor approached, leading a group of architectural students studying the Speakeasy's remarkable preservation. Jackson, would you mind explaining the hydraulic system modifications? These young people are particularly interested in how Keith engineered the floor panels. As Jackson demonstrated the ingenious mechanism that had concealed and revealed history, he reflected on the parallel between the physical system and Millhaven itself, structures designed for concealment, now repurposed for revelation, creating space for authentic experience and connection. The most significant transformation, however, was personal. The skills and knowledge he'd acquired through years of automotive work craftsmanship his family had practiced for generations had found purpose beyond mere commercial application. In preserving and sharing his family's complex legacy, Jackson had discovered not just financial redemption but meaningful work connected to both past and future. That evening, after visitors had departed, Jackson returned to the garage office, now serving as museum administration space. On the wall hung two photographs side by side, his great-grandfather William standing proudly beside the 1924 Cadillac, and cousin Keith in nearly the identical pose almost a century later. Between them, Jackson had added a third image, himself. Continuing the legacy neither could have anticipated would unfold as it had. The brass key that had unlocked this unexpected journey now held a place of honor in a display case explaining the Speakeasy's rediscovery. But its symbolic significance extended far beyond the physical mechanism it had activated. That simple key had unlocked not just a hidden space, but the authentic narrative of a community, offering Millhaven the opportunity to reclaim its economic identity and chart a more equitable future. For Jackson Turner, the inheritance that had initially seemed a burden had revealed itself as a bridge connecting him to family legacy, meaningful work, and a community where craftsmanship and integrity were valued above mere financial metrics. The broken mechanic who had arrived with nothing but debts and disappointment had found not simply financial salvation, but purpose, restoring not just vintage vehicles, but the economic narrative of an entire town. As he locked up for the night, Jackson paused to appreciate how completely his life had transformed through one reluctant road trip to settle a relative's affairs. The journey that began with a hidden key had unlocked possibilities neither he nor Millhaven could have imagined independently, proving that sometimes the most valuable inheritances aren't measured in dollars, but in the opportunities they create for genuine restoration. 1 year after the dramatic confrontation with Richard Blackwood, Millhaven's transformation continued to unfold in ways that surprised even its most optimistic residents. The morning sun streamed through freshly installed stained glass windows in what had once been simply Turner's classic car garage, but was now officially designated as the Turner Prohibition Museum and Cultural Center, a thriving hub of historical tourism, education, and community revitalization. Jackson stood at the newly expanded entrance, watching as staff prepared for another busy day. What had begun as a simple museum had evolved into something far more significant, a catalyst for authentic economic renewal that had captured national attention as a model for struggling post-industrial towns. "Morning, boss," called Marco Rodriguez, Maya's younger brother and the museum's operations manager. Tour buses from Boston and New York already confirmed for this afternoon, and the university group arrives at 11. PBS documentary crew wants final interviews at 2. Jackson nodded, still occasionally startled by how thoroughly his life had changed. The man who had arrived in Millhaven with nothing but debt and disappointment now directed a growing enterprise that employed 27 local residents and had welcomed over 50,000 visitors in its first year. Restoration Workshop. "Ready for the demonstration?" he asked, referring to the expanded garage area where vintage vehicle restoration continued as both practical work and public exhibition. "Alex is doing final prep now," Marco confirmed. That 36 Auburn were working on his drawing serious attention. 3 collectors have already inquired about commissioning similar projects. The museum's success had sparked related enterprises throughout Millhaven, creating an economic ecosystem based on authenticity rather than imposed development. The once vacant storefronts along Main Street now house specialty shops, restaurants, and craft businesses catering to both visitors and locals. Most significantly, these were primarily locally owned independent ventures rather than corporate chains, keeping profits within the community and creating sustainable growth. Eleanor Martinez approached from the research wing, a new addition, housing archives, educational facilities, and community meeting spaces. At 71, she had found renewed purpose as the center's historical director, mentoring a team of younger researchers and coordinating with universities and historical societies across the region. "The governor's office called," she announced, barely containing her excitement. "Our application for the State Heritage District designation has been approved. Millhaven will be officially recognized as a model for historically based community revitalization." This designation brought more than prestige. It included tax incentives, preservation grants, and infrastructure improvements that would further strengthen the town's renaissance. What had begun with one hidden speakeasy had expanded into a comprehensive approach to economic development rooted in authentic local history rather than generic corporate templates. "Keith would be amazed," Jackson said, thinking of his cousin whose vision had set everything in motion. "He saw the potential, but I don't think even he imagined how completely it would transform Millhaven." A memorial plaque near the museum entrance honored Keith Turner's legacy, acknowledging his role in rediscovering both the physical speakeasy and the historical narrative it represented. But the true monument to his vision was the revitalized community itself, a town reclaiming its economic sovereignty after generations of manipulation. The legal proceedings against Blackwood Financial Group continued through state and federal channels, moving with the deliberate pace of complex financial investigations. Richard Blackwood himself had relocated to Florida, maintaining his innocence while distancing himself from the institutions his family had controlled for generations. The bank now operated under state supervision, with reforms addressing decades of preferential lending practices and anti-competitive behaviors. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya arrived carrying advance copies of her book, The Blackwood Effect: How One Family Engineered a Town's Decline and How Its Citizens Engineered Its Revival. The culmination of her investigative reporting had garnered national publisher interest and was already being discussed as a potential documentary series. "Fresh off the press," she announced, distributing copies to Jackson and Eleanor. "First, official copies before tomorrow's release. Page 27 has the photo we found of your great-grandfather and great-uncle with their first garage. I thought you might appreciate seeing it in print." Jackson examined the image, William Turner and his brother standing proudly before their original downtown establishment in 1918, years before Prohibition would transform their business and the town itself. The family resemblance was striking, connecting Jackson physically to a legacy he had only recently embraced. "There's something I've been meaning to show you both," Eleanor said, leading them toward her office in the research wing. "We've been cataloging materials from the county archives, and one of our volunteers discovered something significant yesterday." In her office, Eleanor retrieved a leather portfolio from her desk. These documents were misfiled for decades in municipal tax records, perhaps deliberately. They're the original incorporation papers for Turner Automotive from 1918, including the business license and property deed for the downtown garage. Jackson examined the yellowed papers with growing interest. The address is familiar, but I can't place it exactly. You should, Eleanor replied with a small smile. It's 427 Main Street, currently the Blackwood Financial Group headquarters. The revelation landed with unexpected weight. The bank building was originally your family's first garage, Eleanor confirmed. When the Depression hit and Frederick Blackwood leveraged his stolen Speakeasy profits to expand his banking operations, one of his first acquisitions was the original Turner property. Your great-grandfather was essentially forced out of his own building, which was then demolished to construct what became Blackwood Bank. Maya was already taking notes. The symbolism is almost too perfect. Blackwood literally built his financial empire on top of the Turner Foundation, both figuratively and literally. The discovery added another dimension to the historical narrative. They had been piecing together further evidence of how thoroughly the Blackwood family had worked to erase competing legacies from Millhaven's landscape. What remained unclear was whether this knowledge offered practical implications or merely historical closure. That question answered itself the following morning when Millhaven's newly elected mayor, Carmen Diaz, requested an urgent meeting with Jackson and the museum's board of directors. A former elementary school teacher who had campaigned on economic diversification and historical preservation, Mayor Diaz had been a consistent supporter of the Turner Museum's mission. The State Banking Commission has officially revoked Blackwood Financial's charter, she announced once the board had assembled. As part of the settlement, their assets will be liquidated under court supervision, including the main building downtown. Board member Jim Miller, whose family diner had survived multiple Blackwood pressure campaigns, leaned forward. What happens to the property? That's why I'm here, Mayor Diaz explained. The settlement includes provisions for community reclamation of properties acquired through demonstrably fraudulent means. The Banking Commission believes the original Turner garage location qualifies, given the evidence uncovered during their investigation. Jackson struggled to process the implications. You're saying the bank building could be returned to the Turner family, or more specifically, to the Millhaven Historical Trust as the legal entity you established, the mayor confirmed. The commission recognizes the historical significance and believes this restitution would serve the public interest. The potential symmetry was powerful, not just preserving history, but in some measure restoring it, bringing Millhaven's narrative full circle by reclaiming the original Turner business location after nearly a century. The question remained what such a prominent downtown property might become. In the weeks that followed, as legal procedures advanced toward formal transfer, the museum board engaged the broader community in developing a vision for the property. Rather than making unilateral decisions, they established a collaborative planning process involving local businesses, residents, educational institutions, and government representatives. What emerged was a concept more ambitious than anyone had initially imagined: the Millhaven Innovation Center, a multi-purpose facility combining business incubation, vocational training, community education, and cultural programming. The original Turner automotive legacy would be honored through a focus on sustainable transportation technology, offering young people pathways into modern mechanical and engineering careers, while connecting to the town's authentic historical narrative. 6 months later, Jackson stood on the steps of the former Blackwood Bank building as crowds gathered for the official transfer ceremony. The imposing facade still bore the Blackwood name in stone, a reminder of how permanently established their influence had once seemed. Soon, restoration specialists would begin the delicate work of revealing the building's original architectural elements while adapting the space for its new purpose. Mayor Diaz addressed the assembled community, contextualizing the moment within. Millhaven's broader revitalization. What we celebrate today is not simply the transfer of one property, but the reclamation of our community's economic narrative. For generations, Millhaven's development was controlled by concentrated interests that prioritized power over prosperity. Today marks another step toward a more equitable and authentic future. As applause rippled through the crowd, Jackson recognized faces that had been present at that first confrontational morning. Outside Keith's garage, now the museum that had sparked Millhaven's renaissance. Shop owners who had resisted Blackwood pressure. Elderly residents who had carried family stories of economic manipulation. Young entrepreneurs building businesses aligned with the town's authentic character rather than imposed corporate vision. When Jackson's turn came to speak, he found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment. When I arrived in Millhaven 18 months ago, I came to liquidate an inheritance as quickly as possible. I had no connection to this community, no understanding of its history, and frankly, no expectation of staying beyond a weekend. He gestured toward the building behind him. What I discovered beneath my cousin's garage changed everything, not just for me, but for Millhaven itself. The Speakeasy wasn't simply a historical curiosity or potential tourist attraction. It was evidence of how power had been acquired and maintained, how prosperity had been controlled rather than shared, and how authentic community narrative had been suppressed in favor of convenient fiction. Jackson continued, finding words for the transformation he had witnessed both personally and communally. The true value of what we uncovered wasn't in vintage spirits or Prohibition artifacts, though those certainly helped fund our start. He acknowledged to appreciative laughter. The real treasure was truth itself, the documented reality of how Millhaven's economic trajectory had been engineered rather than evolving naturally. He looked out at the gathered community. That truth became a foundation for something new, or perhaps more accurately, for something authentic been suppressed for generations. What we've built together over these months isn't merely economic development in the conventional sense. It's the reclamation of economic agency by the community itself. As the ceremony concluded and the symbolic keys to the building were presented, Jackson found himself reflecting on how completely his life had transformed through one reluctant inheritance. The failing mechanic drowning in debt and betrayal had found not just financial redemption, but purpose connecting to family legacy while helping a community reclaim its economic narrative. That evening, after the crowds had dispersed, Jackson returned to the Speakeasy beneath the original garage, now the museum's centerpiece. The underground space had been carefully preserved while making it accessible to visitors, maintaining historical authenticity while serving contemporary educational purposes. Maya joined him, camera in hand for additional documentation for the expanded edition of her book already in development. "Did you ever imagine when you first found this place that it would lead to all this?" she asked, gesturing toward the carefully preserved bar with its original bottles, the vintage Cadillac with its secret compartments, the historical displays that connected Prohibition-era economics to contemporary community development. "Not remotely," Jackson admitted. "I was looking for anything valuable enough to pay off my debts so I could start over somewhere else. I never expected to find home." That was the most remarkable transformation. Millhaven had become home in ways Providence never had, connecting Jackson to both family legacy and community purpose. The skills he had developed through years of mechanical work had found application beyond mere commerce, contributing to a vision of economic development rooted in authenticity rather than exploitation. 3 years after that life-changing discovery, as Millhaven continued its revitalization and the Innovation Center prepared for its grand opening, Jackson sometimes reflected on the perfect symbolism of the brass key that had unlocked everything. That simple object had opened not just a hidden door, but possibilities that neither he nor the community could have imagined independently. The key now held a place of honor in the museum's central display, alongside photographs of 4 generations of Turner mechanics and craftsmen, from William with his Prohibition-era Cadillac to Jackson himself with the restored vehicles that had become the museum's signature exhibits. The display's simple caption captured the essence of Millhaven's transformation. Some inheritances can't be measured in dollars. For Jackson Turner, that inheritance had proven to be more valuable than any financial windfall connecting him to family legacy, meaningful work, and a community where craftsmanship and integrity were valued above mere profit metrics. The broken mechanic who had arrived with nothing but debts and disappointment had found not simply financial salvation, but purpose, restoring not just vintage vehicles, but the economic narrative of an entire town. As visitors continued exploring the museum that had catalyzed Millhaven's renaissance, Jackson often thought of his cousin Keith, whose vision and persistence had made everything possible. The inheritance that had initially seemed a burden had revealed itself as a bridge connecting past to future, individual to community, and financial survival to meaningful prosperity. In a town that had once epitomized economic manipulation and decline, a new narrative was taking shape, one of authentic development, shared prosperity, and communal agency. And it had all begun with one reluctant road trip, one hidden key, and the courage to unlock truth that had remained buried for nearly a century. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.